Hope that wasn't too abrupt.
Not at all. That was good. I wanted to change the subject just a little bit because I started reading this new book. I can't trying to remember the name of it now, but it's something that I know that you're very interested in, and so it's quantum theory. And this is a very basic package here. It's really kind of like it's a graphic guide, so it's almost like quantum for dummies.
Yeah.
But you and I have talked about this. It starts out with the history of physicists that they had their tried and true stuff, a body in motion.
Einstein's theory
got
of
to be
relativity.
cause and effect,
Sure.
and all this stuff and everything. But then quantum starts to change things, and how they start to look at physics and how they can explain the unexplainable. That's about as far as I've gotten on this whole thing.
That's tough stuff, man.
But this is breaking it down to make it easier to understand. This is something
How
that
is that possible?
Rex Lee actually recommended this to me. So if you have some pretty basic building blocks of science, I'm about 20% into it right now. It does make sense. But I want to try to wrap my head around the concept of quantum, which I've never really been able to do at all. All I know is this.
No one can.
Is that I believe that there are multiple. We're only touching the very tip of the iceberg on what we know here. But I do believe that there are many things that we can learn here by thinking outside of the box when it comes to science.
Absolutely.
And here's some things that I found interesting as I was reading this, is that as they were debating these types of things revolving around quantum, there's a history here. I believe this is a pretty normal thing in science, but as everybody had their tried and true. I mean, as far as this science goes. And when these guys like Einstein and Bohr and Planck started coming out with these different ideas, it really rocked the science community and these physicists. And they really came against these guys at first because it was like, how dare you?
Dude, when you don't understand something, it makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it was very hard for them to break through with these new ideas. And I think this is one of the areas of science that, because of human nature, because of exactly what you said, this is a struggle in science, is really trying to adopt new ideas. And I see it also. I read this other book. This one's called They Were Christians, but it goes into a couple of guys, Joseph Lister and Louis Pasteur. These guys are awesome. Basically, the book is these very famous people that you wouldn't have known that they were Christians. They're Christians, and they prayed a lot, and they attribute really their successes to God. But anyhow, Joseph Lister and Louis Pasteur back in the 1850s started to come up with some ideas separately. So Lister was a surgeon, and the one example was he was operating on a guy that had a compound fracture. Successful surgery, guy dies later on, sepsis. Why did that happen? They can't figure out why these things are happening, and Lister can't figure out, like, if an injury happens, like a broken arm, well, that'll heal up fine. But if it breaks the skin, for some reason, these things are happening. Why are they happening? They didn't know anything about germs at the time. And Louis Pasteur does this.
Or anesthesia.
Yeah, well, right. Louis Pasteur.
It was 1867.
Doing this thing. They're a little late on that when it comes to the Civil War.
Dude, it wasn't that long ago. That's horrifying to think about.
Yeah, think about it. And this is why
not just anesthesia, but what you're saying about antibiotics and germs and all, that's not that long ago.
No, it's not. And so Pasteur is doing this research on fermentation, and he comes up with this theory that what's causing fermentation are actually something called microbes, which are in the air, which are attacking this body of whatever it was that was fermenting. And so this idea of germs come out, and Lister, who's in England, Pasteur is in France, he reads Pasteur's article, and he's like enlightened by this whole thing. He's like, I got it. He goes in because he's a surgeon. He decides, look, we're going to clean this place up. They would wear these smocks that were just all crusted with blood and guts and everything. And that was a status symbol for them. Like, look how hard I've been working, right?
Oh my God.
They were using like, here's your knife. I just used it on that guy, but no problem. Let's use it on this guy too. They were doing all that.
Yeah, just ate a steak with it. Yeah.
The place is filthy, right? But they didn't understand that this had a relationship to the outcomes of these surgeries. So Lister cleans up everything. He finds this substance that he believes are killing the germs. By the way, Listerine is named after this guy.
That's a nice little tidbit there.
Yeah, right. And as a result, he starts having these great outcomes, but it didn't matter. These guys are writing articles about this, and the medical community just attacks these guys. What do you, invisible things are happening here? Are you kidding me? They demonize these guys.
This is good stuff here.
They almost lose their careers, as a matter of fact, as a result of it, but they keep pressing on. That is the secret here. They keep pressing on with evidence, and they're finally able to break through, which changes the entire world, actually. To say the least. These are the things, so today when you hear about like believe the science, well, that's a bit of a misnomer, because telling people believe the science is not actually science. Yeah, exactly. And so they were telling Pasteur and Lister the same thing. Believe the science. We got the science already. Who the heck are you to tell us these kinds of things? And I think that, this is something that's interesting for us to look at in our day and age, and how dangerous it is to be myopic physics, right? in these things, right? Quantum physics. And so let me just say the one thing on quantum physics is that I believe I think it's so interesting when we look at shows like Star Trek and we see all the things that were in that show that didn't exist back then that now exist.
Like the flip phone, which we're already behind.
Exactly. You look at my smartphone and it just totally blows away what those guys were using, but we put it out there. And the thing that I see is the transporter machine. And I really believe that there's a probability that something like that is possible.
About 10 years ago, I read an article, came out of Western Reserve University down the street from me. They successfully teleported a molecule, maybe an atom, something like that, like an incredible distance.
Interesting.
So that's the very beginning. Yeah.
I think that's really interesting. And I believe
that's all the detail I remember, but it's got to be tied up into quantum physics, because there's the thing about the age-old thing about quantum physics that they use as a for instance is like, okay, in this box can be an atom that will exist either over on the left or on the right. It just matters which gets observed first. That's what brings it into that reality. It's hard to, the thing about quantum physics is I'm sure you're finding out. You say you're reading this book that makes it easy. Sure.
No, easier to get the concept, not actually understand. Right?
I know, because I would read these things all the time, and I've said this before, and be like, "Eureka! I got it!" And then go to explain it to somebody, and it goes away.
It's like you have a dream and you're like, I had this great dream. Wait a second, what was
like
it?
that. Well, the thing about quantum physics is it's so many premises.
Right.
Like if
Built
you
on
understand
top of
this
each other,
and then
right.
understand that, and then all these things come together and you're like, okay, got it. But I know the one thing that stands out as important to me is string theory. I remember reading that if string theory is to be fact, then there must be at least 10 dimensions.
Yeah. And that's the thing that I really keyed on as a Christian.
That's a secret.
These are things that I'm interested in, not only as just a person, but as a Christian, because as I read my Bible, first I know that there's a spiritual realm, and then there's a realm that we're in right now, the physical realm.
That's when we start unlocking these things.
Right. Yeah. And also, here's another thing. In the Bible, Jesus says, these things you see me do, you'll do, and even greater. And I see where Jesus is able to be in his glorified body to, after he's resurrected, where he's in one room and then he can appear in a completely different place in an instant. So he's the master scientist, according to the Bible. Scientifically, I'm thinking this is possible then. So
I follow you.
Yeah. So in quantum, does quantum mean light? I don't know, but as I'm reading a lot of this, I'm seeing how light is a big part of what quantum is, and frequencies, light waves. It says in the Bible that Jesus is light. So light, I don't know. I just see.
I got the definition.
Go ahead.
The smallest amount of physical quantity that can exist independently, especially a discrete quantity of electromagnetic radiation. So you're pretty much right.
It's right in there.
Yeah.
And I'm fascinated by this. I don't know where it goes, but just I'm fascinated by just the key. Seems like light is a key to everything.
Mm-hmm. There's so many things that we don't understand, and we always think that we're so advanced right now. We just talked a minute ago about in 1850, not that long ago.
Yeah,
we were extremely primitive. I think electricity was just being developed at that time. As I said, anesthesia was 1867. The Wild West was like 1870 to 1890.
Yeah, I mean, the telegraph was just invented right around the Civil War, the 1850s and 60s. And so, I mean,
it's like life began right about that time.
Isn't it interesting when you take a look at the last 150 years, technology just hockey? It's like you look at those hockey stick graphs, it's just like it just straight up from right around 1850.
And that's my point. We always think we're so advanced. We always think we're at the pinnacle. There was some clown that said in something like 1890, everything that could be invented has been invented.
Right.
Right. So we always think like that. And we're talking about quantum physics and the unveiling of dimensions, of more dimensions. Okay. There's so many things that we can't see. If we could see radio waves and radiation visibly, it would be an entirely different experience that we would have in our lives. If we only saw in 2 dimensions, it would be like, I read this in, I think, Discover magazine a while back ago, talking about how we don't see other dimensions that are most likely, I believe there's probably infinite dimensions, but string theory says there has to be a minimum of 10. So in order to fathom what that might be like is if we only saw in 2 dimensions and a cube came into our existence. Okay, we're only like a piece of paper.
Yeah.
2 dimensions. Yeah. We would see a tiny pinprick, and then we would see this thing getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it would just close and see a tiny pinprick as the cube actually went through our existence, if you follow what I'm saying. So we never saw those sides.
We only saw the one-dimensional piece of it. Right.
And
now,
so
that is interesting.
Dude, if we could even see 5 dimensions, it probably it would explain what happens after we die, in the interpretation of heaven, UFOs, and time.
Because in this type of theory, even time and space, this is what we're talking about. Time travel, space travel, interdimensional travel, right. These are things that I go back to my Bible again, because to me, I can see the root of this right there in the Word of God. And so these things have to exist, right? I mean,
yes,
they have to.
I'm starting to believe that the Bible, because what I learned from you for a large part, and then what I learn as we get more advanced and we learn more in AI and all of this, things that, okay, we couldn't fathom that smartphone 20 years ago. People would tell us, oh, right, we're going to have this, and be like, never a million years.
I know what you mean, right?
Okay. I'm starting to think that the Bible was, I always say, I certainly believe it was divinely inspired, but it was the best way that we could explain where we're going, what we're advancing into at that period of time. You've told me about, when I talk about, oh yeah, that smartphone, that's going to be a chip in your head soon. And you say that there's something alluding to that in the Bible. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's the mark. Yes.
Yeah. And even the second coming of Jesus, I think that is, I've said it before, I think that's kind of our merging with AI. I think that's all good. The same thing that's happening at the same time. I'm serious. I just think the Bible was explaining stuff in the only way that we could understand it at that time.
I think that you have some good points here, because certainly the Bible was divinely inspired, and inspired through people. And people were writing down what God was showing them, but God was using their personality as well.
Yeah.
So you take a look at some prophecies that are in the Bible, and you can see, wait, this is, especially if you take a look at the Revelation, you can see that this is a person that's seeing these things in a vision, but he can't explain what he's seeing, because what he's seeing doesn't actually compute in his own day. So there are, so I get what you're saying right there. I do also think that with all of this technology that has suddenly appeared on the scene, and all of these prophecies in the Bible that line up to the second coming of Christ, if I look at the prophecies, it seems like we're right there at that point where all of this technology actually is. And here's something that in my Bible that I understand very clearly, is that there is a prophecy that's in this, it has to do with the king of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar is his name, and he has this vision of a man, and it's basically goes through all of world history from that point to where Christ returns. And the statue actually is what time is. And it ends up, it's kind of hard to explain, but it ends up where a rock that is cut not by human hands, who is Christ, strikes the foot of this statue, and the statue comes down, and it just turns into dust. And what's left is that rock, which expands and becomes our reality. Now, that's a pretty, like you said, deep. Yeah. What is that? But basically what it's showing is all of what man thinks is, man wants to be God, right? And yes. We see this in our governments all the time.
Yes.
All that man has comes to nothing. And everything that God has is what's left, and what's good, and what's true, and what's righteous. Now, how does that pertain to technology? I don't know. But could it mean that all of our technology has been inspired by God? Or could it mean that our technology is great, but God is even greater than that? And the things that we think we know, just like we think we know about germs, right? But maybe there's a whole lot more to know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're coming to that point, whether it means what you're saying or not. I know that God is God, and that whatever it means, he is God. We're going to see. We're going to find out. But your concepts are very interesting to me. And you've brought up this quantum theory thing to me a couple of times during the last couple of years we've been doing this. And so when this all came up in my head, I should look at, I feel drawn into this. Like, I need to figure out, I need to learn about this.
Us humans, we're thirsty. Just our 100% primal drive is to advance. You know, that's we're trying to come back to God is what we're trying to do. And I really kind of believe, and it's probably an infinite journey. It could very well be. Infinity is everything, infinite dimensions and infinite metamorphosis. But I feel like we're going to merge with AI. It's inevitable. And that is when we come back to God. We become God, and it's all the same thing. I always believe God is just one. And the Big Bang is just, everything was one, and then boom, blows apart. And now it's all pieces that all want to come back together. And then that happens infinitely. And there's
God
always the
infinite,
one, though.
Right?
The one still always exists.
I agree with that. See, there's a lot we agree with here, Barry.
It's the same thing. That's my point. I think the Bible has just put the stuff in terms that we could only understand. You even said God exists outside of space and time.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Exactly true. It's back to quantum again, right? This is what's so interesting about this whole thing to me. And here's another thing, Barry, is thinking about infinity. Like, how do you wrap your arms around that? Yeah. But we always think about infinity as forever, right? It's just forever. It doesn't end. Yeah. But here's the other side of infinity that nobody really thinks about, is there's no beginning either. Correct. Infinity has no beginning.
Correct.
So how do you put your head, and we call our God the infinite God. He is infinite. Yeah. And so how do you wrap your arms around this? And back to the statue is, man is not infinite. We're here in a certain place and time, right? I'm like, this is that statue in my head. That's what I've got here. It's a statue. And in the end, all of man's wisdom and knowledge comes to nothing. And really all of God's wisdom and knowledge is elevated. Well, that not to say that God's wisdom isn't in us, because it is. It is. That's the only place wisdom comes from, according to my Bible as well. So it seems like in our world, there's this battle between what is God's and what is man's, what's God's creation and what man thinks he's created. And we're so just arrogant.
We're a piece of God. We're like a raindrop.
And at the same time, there's this whole push in our own society that we know it. We can figure it all out. We don't need God because we got it all here. We've figured it out. And so there's that push and pull is constantly happening here. And we're in the middle of that whole thing. The push and pull does accelerate our advancement, though, because we're always questioning back and forth. So it's kind of a necessary thing. Isn't it interesting too, Barry, that over the last 150 years, we have had 2 world wars, and we consistently have these other wars that are happening as well. That never happened in human history. By the way, there's a prophecy in the Bible about these kinds of wars and rumors of wars that we've never seen before. Jesus talks about this and says, when you see these things, you know that we're coming to the end. And these things have all happened. Now, interestingly, through these wars, the Civil War, the World War I, World War II, our technology has necessarily advanced exponentially through those wars. Our medical technology, our physical technology, airplanes, tanks, all these things are also a part of our lives, everyday lives, that have improved our lives, improved our lifespans, improved all these things, but they happen through war. which is part of these prophecies. It all comes together. It's actually kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
Well, the ultimate war, we've mentioned this before, the ultimate war will be the space race. Whoever wins that battle. And we've talked about before, harnessing infinite renewable energy, building a giant solar panel out in space and beaming that energy to wherever you want it.
It's so interesting you're saying this, Barry.
That's the ultimate, that's the last war.
According to the Bible, the last war is against God. And all of the world's armies line up to battle God.
Wow.
It's in the book of Revelation.
Wow.
And
I'm going to have to think about that. Look
defeated.
for a YouTube video on that.
Jesus returns and defeats them with the sword of his tongue, meaning with his words, and they're instantly defeated. Very interesting. You go back to that statue again. This is what that looks like, and we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Wow.
It's crazy, right? But
you just give it. You're adding a little more information to my thought process.
Right.
I'll have to walk back to walks. Man, that's where I do my best thinking. Think
about this, man. It's like the greatest sci-fi movie you've ever seen, right? I mean, is when you and then you start to think about all the sci-fi movies that we've seen over the last 30 years. Rex and I talked about this on Cyber Talk TV, how we have these very prophetic movies that have happened. Like Rex has been doing a lot of talking about that movie back in 1971, Rollerball. Where it's a sport like football, but really it's being used to really control the people. And through the game,
didn't they kill each other?
That's what. But let me just explain. Through the game, the game is used by these corporations to really take over society. And one of the pieces is that it's all about the collective. And in this particular game, I'm trying to remember the name of the star. Khan is his last name. Anyway, he becomes very famous at this game. He's sort of like the Tom Brady of football, right? And the corporations are like, we can't let this guy, because now he's bigger than the game. You can't be bigger than the game, right?
That sounds like the Chinese government,
isn't it? It's just like it. It's so interesting. And so what they do is they start changing the rules of the game to get more and more brutal, because what they're trying to do is kill this guy. But it's a movie really about how the corporations, multinational corporations, take over basically the whole world. And then he goes into the movie Soylent Green, another movie from the 70s, which is sort of the after effect of how corporations take over and what actually happens. And Soylent Green, you'll see in the movie, they're wearing masks.
Oh, total dystopian.
You've got all these scenes in these cities that are rioting and stuff like that, like we've seen over the last couple of years. And Soylent Green is a food company who's basically running everything. And you've got the elites that they can have meat and things like that, but everybody else, you're not allowed to have meat. You got to eat the Soylent Green. Well, it turns out the famous line is Soylent Green is people. So Soylent Green is actually taking people and killing them and using them as food. It's interesting scenes in these movies so much remind us of the things that are happening today. Not that they're eating us, but just, you can take these things to the next degree.
Oh yeah.
And we've seen so many other movies that seem to imitate, kind of where things are actually going. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say everything begins with art, with creativity. Even a rocket ship, it started out as crazy science fiction, and next
just
thing
like Star Trek.
Exactly.
Yeah, like we talked about earlier. So here's my premise: is like you're saying, everything starts out as art, but is it God who's inspiring us to put these things out there?
Whatever you want to call God. Yeah.
And then as a result, we're inspired by our imagination, which God gives us our imagination anyway. And we're inspired by that. Or is he showing us what's to come through some of these things. It's just kind of interesting to think about those kinds of things.
I think our brains are just really strong Wi-Fi, and
that's interesting.
We get our knowledge, or limited knowledge, that we are always trying to expand upon from God, the one. And so that's why we're always trying to expand more and more. We're trying to get back to that so badly.
Isn't that interesting too, Barry? Because we talk about like radio waves and frequencies and everything, and we can communicate over radio waves. We didn't know that again until the last 100 years. We send images and things like that. I mean, we're talking over this medium right now as a result. And then when you start to think about the spiritual and how God can communicate with us, we think we figured it out through all of these technologies, but here God's been doing that all along.
Yeah. Which is, man, I think there's more and more, which could put you right in the matrix, and God is our program.
There's another one. The Matrix is another one, which is so fantastic. When you start to take a look at, again, the Bible of this, it says in the Bible that because God lives outside of time and space, that I right now am at the right hand of the Father with Christ right now. At the same time, I'm here. How could that be? But according to the Bible, that's the truth. And so that's mind-blowing. Back to quantum again. It's like there's ways to figure this out. I don't know if my brain can handle it.
It's kind of funny that first of all, the coincidence that we were born in this time. Out of all of this supposed history, we happen to be born in this time, right? Where everything's coming to a pinnacle. And we're given something of a rudimentary playbook with the Bible to kind of like a maze, like find your way through this maze. And here are the hints.
God, I'm so excited by what you're saying, because it's reminding me of this story about this woman, and her name was Esther, and she, out of pure coincidence, she becomes the queen in not Babylon,
is this a book you read?
Persia. This is in the
history?
Bible. The name of the book is Esther in the Bible. So she become, out of pure coincidence, she's a Jew. The king doesn't know it. He has a beauty contest. She's the most beautiful. He picks her, and they're married. She's the queen, and now the king is, through trickery, the king is tricked into putting this edict out to kill all the Jews in the land. And so of course the king doesn't know his wife is a Jew, and her uncle Mordecai appears to Esther and says, hey, you need to go talk to the king and call this whole thing off. I'm shortening the story big time. And she's like, I'm not going in and talking to him. No one's allowed to go talk to the king, and if you go in there without being invited, the punishment is execution. And Mordecai says, hey, look, do you think you're going to get away? You're going to be found out that you're a Jew too, and you're going to get killed along with the rest of us. And besides, he says this line, he says, God, you were born, according to God, you were born for such a time as this. That's the line, Barry. And you said, you and I are born at this time. Now, in this story, the queen absorbs that. And then she goes in and risks her life and talks to the king. And the king accepts her. And this amazing events happen after that. And bottom line is the Jewish nation is saved. But here you and I are at this time, like you say. Isn't it a coincidence that we're born at this time? According to God, you and I were born for such a time as this. We're here having this conversation for a purpose. There's something about... We're a part of this. We're a part of history, which really is his story. And you and I are put right in the center of that story. And boy, that's a pretty wild way of looking at how sometimes we feel like we're a pawn in life, right?
Oh yeah.
To the Bible, no, we were born for we're here for a purpose. We have a purpose.
Yeah. Are we riding on the bus, or are we driving the bus?
Yeah, there's a question.
It's a very good question. And that gets back to, you could go all the way back to the manifesting conversation. Well, you're actually both. You're a partner. Your co-creator is the infinite, the God, and the closer you can align with that, the more control you have over reality. That's the theory of manifestation. Which, and by the way, Mordecai, what a cool name.
Yeah, right.
Why don't
Mordecai.
I know someone named Mordecai?
Mordecai. Hey, come on over. I don't know. Morty is
because then it
Mordecai.
would be Morty in about a minute.
Just Morty,
which is like an old man name. Yeah.
But I think about like all these coincidences, like you take a look at the life of Jesus, and at the end, Pilate has a choice. Either you're going to crucify him, or I'm going to give you a choice. And at this time of the year, we set one prisoner free. So he pulls the worst criminal out of the prison. His name is Barabbas. He pulls him out of there. Barabbas, right?
Barabbas and Mordecai, man.
Yeah,
These
right.
You
see them hanging out. That's what made me think of it, by the way. So Barabbas comes out. Barabbas is a murderer. He's like, and not only that, he's a robber. Like, this is a guy that you're going to release him out here. He's going to kill you and rob all your stuff. And here's Jesus. He just heals people, And so what happened was the high priest had corrupted the crowd. He says, which one? And they start yelling. They want Jesus crucified. Well, who do you want freed? Barabbas. And so Barabbas is free. So I
see parallels of this going on today.
And so here's something interesting about Barabbas. It's not just that he was freed. And this is like Jesus died so this guy could be freed, right? It's the whole concept of who Jesus is. Yeah. He died for us so that we could have salvation. He had his salvation, Barabbas. Bar-Abbas. In the Hebrew language, bar means son, Abbas means father, son of the Father. Now, what an interesting name that Pilate chose. He didn't know anything about this. What coincidences? This guy was born for such a time as this. No one knows the story of what happened to Barabbas after he was released. But there's this great movie that Anthony Quinn is in. He plays Barabbas, and it shows what happens to his life afterwards. It's all fictitious, but it's such a great story of redemption. And this guy goes right back into crime immediately and starts doing all this stuff. And he ends up in prison. And the guy that he's chained to is a Christian that wants to kill him because he thinks he's responsible for the death of his Lord. He ends up becoming a Christian, and he ends up getting crucified in the end. But he comes back to God in the end, and he's just like, I'm here and I'm yours. And he's got peace of mind. And I remember my dad saying this many times, is that, the whole world is looking for one thing. And a lot of people think it's money, but it's not. And a lot of people think it's health, but it's not. It's peace of mind.
Agreed.
Peace of mind. That's all you could be in any situation and you're going to be okay.
Because even if you're chasing wealth, really what you're doing is it's symbolizing security for you, safety, and that's peace of mind. Right. So no, I totally agree with that.
Yeah. That was a great lesson from my dad. And anyway, boy, this is a stimulating conversation.
Oh, great conversation. I learned a lot from this.
Thank you. Yeah, it's just really fun not very many people can have that kind of a conversation. And what's beautiful about it is you're not even a Christian, and we can see like the same thing.
I get so many more pieces of the puzzle from you, from your Christian teachings, and I add them to what I've thought about and formulated, and what I've discovered through reading things like Buddhism and other things. And it's just all a mishmash to me. What makes sense? And boy, you add a lot of quality pieces to that puzzle.
Thank you, Barry.
Start to clear up a little bit. Crazy as they are.
I'm in my life. That's a great way of putting it, is kind of clear the fog and everything. And I'm a big, of course I study my Bible, and that's first and foremost to me, but I'm a huge history guy. I want to learn. I want to know, because I don't want people to fool me. You know what I mean?
I know, that's how I feel. That's why I don't believe anybody. I just have to figure it out, you know.
See, and that's the critical thinking skills that you've developed and that I've developed. That seems to be a thing that they're trying to squelch out of our society.
Yes.
And that people
it can't be. There's just too many people that are just wanting the truth.
You're right about that. And societies have tried to do that. It's been lots of atrocities, but they've never succeeded. It's never succeeded. And you can see this happening. You know, of course, we have this happening here with censorship and everything. Look at what's happening in China right now and how they're using the internet and how they're using these social platforms and everything to really squelch out that kind of critical thinking. They want everybody to be a drone. They want everyone to just not think, follow directions, do what you're told, and everything will be fine. We had that interview on Cyber Talk TV with Steven Scherer that wrote that book about being in the Chinese prison. And that's the thing he was saying is that, you know, as he talked to the people in China, he loved them, lovely people there, but the society is trained to not ask questions. That's up to the government. If we want to be happy, we just do as we're told. And
you know what, though? That's the scary part, because I think it was last week we talked about how I mentioned that journalist who was from Vancouver, and she left Canada. She lives in Mexico now because she said she just couldn't stand the cultural climate. She was talking about Trudeau and all that dumb paint by numbers things that he says to appeal to wokeism. But she said the population they want to be told what to do. That's how they feel safe. I know it is scary. And there's a lot of people in our country that are like that, but there's so many people that really want the truth. And these podcasts are really feeding a big hunger for truth. Mainstream media, it appeals to so many people, but less than it used to.
Barry, I have, because you're making me think about something really important, especially for over 55. I'm sorry, over 55, over 50. Let's change the name of the show. For over 50 starting over is that, me personally, I've mostly worked for corporations all of my life. And we can see how corporate world is changing and dominating things now. You've been a person that freed themselves from corporate life early on in life in your 30s and 20s, 27. I mean, that's, you got you pulled the ripcord early, you built yourself up a career doing this. You've done quite well. Here I am at 55 and I'm looking to see what else is out there and everything. But, I was talking a lot with Rex this week about consulting and, putting myself into a position to do consulting for businesses and this being a way to have a measure of freedom, but also it's a big risk at the same time. Right. So, I would like, we're running out of time here, but I'd like to, maybe next week bend your ear about your ideas on consulting. And
let's do it. I can't wait.
That would be extremely interesting, not only for me, but for our audience as well.
No, I can't wait. I'm going to be thinking about it all week. And I just want to say, that you can do both. Don't be afraid. You can pursue both a part-time gig in consulting, meaning temporary. Okay. You find a 1-month contract. Cool. You could still look for a full-time job, or that may turn into a full-time job.
That's what happened with Rex. When he realized that he had cancer, he right at the same time he got this fantastic job offer, and he passed on it because he just didn't think it was fair to take that job with everything that he had confronting him. So he was able to land a consulting gig, which was only 3 months, and he's still doing that 5 years later. And he loves it. He loves loves it very much. And, so he was telling me and how to manage forward with something like that. He's got a templated contract that he uses that he sent over to me. And we talked all about how to position that whole thing.
Nice.
It'd be very interesting to talk with you. I know you work with people and help them do this, and you've created your own business. I'm sure you've done contract work a lot. And so it'd be great to get your wisdom on that.
We'll do that right in the upfront segment of next week. I think it'll be very interesting for everyone.
Awesome, Barry.
And this is the climate today. The world has changed, and COVID accelerated everything. It made people so much more aware of the possibility of working remote from anywhere in the world.
Yeah, no kidding. And I look at like the changes that are happening in healthcare right now, and some of the things that are happening. I just read something this morning about a person that presented at an emergency department with chest pains, and but he had tested negative he tested positive for COVID, and so he ended up, there were 5 people in front of him in the ER, and he ended up waiting out there for hours and hours. And then when they finally brought him in, he coded and died. And, and so the whole thing is, okay, well, he presented with chest pains and there were 5 people in front of him. That should have been a priority. Why didn't they take that guy in? And so we're having a lot of COVID's causing a lot of problems in healthcare right now. And we're seeing a lot of people, losing their jobs because of the vaccine mandates. We're seeing shortages at hospitals right now as a result. Some hospitals are closing down as a result right now. We have people that don't want to work with somebody that hasn't had the vaccination. As a doctor, they don't want to take in patients like this. And then we've got a lot of these physicians and nurses that are out of work. And as I think about the tragedy of all of this, I also think there's a big opportunity here because we can see that healthcare is evolving, and a lot of it's moving outside of the hospital and back into the home.
True.
And with these people, we talk about independent contractors and things like this, these people that are out there, if there's a way to organize this actually could work out to be a big benefit to the community. For somebody that can think outside of the box and see beyond the tragedy and look for the silver lining, somebody that can see this as the glass is half full, I totally see a tremendous opportunity here to come in, swoop down and provide a service for this community that desperately needs it.
And you know what? Just coincidentally, since everything's so coincidental in our lives. You just happen to be You just happen to be of the perfect age, experience, and temperament to take this on. It's perfect timing.
Maybe I was born for such a time as this, Barry.
Coincidentally.
We should end on that note.
Then we have to. Because you've left me with a lot to think about. I'm really appreciative of that. What a great day. What a great day. What a great way to start off.
Yeah, big time. Right. I've got just so you know, I've got a big interview coming up at 1:00 my time. It's a panel interview. I've got a VP of sales. I got the VP of clinical. I got the VP of operations. They're talking to me from this one company. I'm flying out to Texas on tomorrow. Actually, I'm going to be going to Dallas, and I've got interviews happening with a different company on Monday, and we'll see. It's going to be an all-day thing, and flying back on Monday night, so I'll have lots to update you on when I get back.
I wouldn't mind seeing you in Dallas.
It would be Austin, actually.
That would be very cool. Just keep your mind open to if they happen to say, we have this short-term need, say, oh yeah, I'll float you a 3-month contract. I'll take care of that.
Yeah, I mean, that's something I'm thinking about. So, that's definitely something. Yeah, lots of things going on, man. It's an exciting time. And it's also one of those where it's like, hang on.
Very true. No, it is. It's very true, but very stimulating. What a great time to be alive.
Amen.
All right, brother. Love you.
Love you too, Barry.
Have a good weekend.
Bye. You too.